territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people and the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. Following the announcement by the RCMP and coroner today, I'd like to extend my condolences to the families of the 3 people who have lost their lives on Highway 99. We are aware of a further missing person. While the search is being suspended due to current conditions, the work will continue as soon as weather permits. To anyone who believes their loved one is missing and has not been able to make contact, please reach out to any RCMP detachment to make a report. This past week has challenged all of us, time and time again. And while we've seen countless examples of heroism and community resilience, we are still very much responding to this emergency, and we will be for the next short while. We must also recognize and appreciate those on the front lines who have done incredible work. This past week, the aptly named Community of Hope has shown unbelievable hospitality to displaced travelers. In Chilliwack, we've seen neighbors helping neighbors get the essentials. Merritt has been largely evacuated, but the community spirit remains strong as they're supported by hardworking staff and volunteers in Kelowna and Kamloops. I know that there have been challenges with a number of evacuees in a short window of time, but provincial staff and emergency support service centres around the province are stepping up to navigate backlogs and expedite emergency supports. For those who have been waiting, we will be reimbursing accommodation costs for those who are eligible. The process for that reimbursement is being worked through right now. I've also had many opportunities to engage with the mayors and leadership of these and many more flood-affected communities. And I can't tell you how proud I am of the way our province has come together. Proud of the way that local leadership has led, and how the province, the military, search and rescue groups, fire and police departments, road crews, and selfless, everyday British Columbians are rolling up their sleeves and doing what needs to be done. We will get through this. We will get through this together if everyone plays and does their part. I know British Columbians have big hearts and are looking for ways to support. Trusted organizations like the Canadian Red Cross, the Salvation Army, BC Food Banks, and the BC Liquor Stores are great ways to do so. But importantly, you can also help by following the measures announced yesterday on non-essential travel along the severely affected highways and by conserving fuel. If you can avoid travel, work from home, or take public transit for the next 10 days, you will help ensure that we have the fuel and access and means to keep responding as we need to. Right now, we all need to do our part to make sure emergency vehicles and essential vehicles can do their jobs. As we pass through fall and head towards winter, I urge people to pay close attention to weather warnings given the unpredictability that comes with climate change. Environment Canada has issued a winter storm advisory for the North Coast, and we're expecting heavy precipitation and wind. As the storm moves to the South Coast starting Sunday, rain will reach the heavily impacted areas in the Fraser Valley. Given the vulnerabilities, the existing conditions on the ground, Environment Canada is looking at issuing an advisory for this area. I encourage everyone to think about ways they can get prepared for potentially stormy weather in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Based on what we've seen this week in BC, Environment Canada, whom I spoke with this morning, is speeding up development of a new ranking system for atmospheric rivers. This will help all of us be better prepared for everything from localized flooding and winds to bigger storm events. This new approach is based on a system the U.S. is already using. I was briefed, as I said, by Environment Canada on this earlier today, and I want to thank the federal government for taking on this important work. As we've seen throughout the pandemic, staying calm will help us get through this next short period of time. Temporary, non-essential travel restrictions are in place for those traveling along sections of Highway 99, Highway 3, and Highway 7, which have been severely damaged. The temporary limitation on non-essential fuel consumption in southwestern BC is so we can keep commercial traffic moving, stable our supply chains, and make sure that everyone gets home safely. Over the next 10 days, we know that we have enough gas for essential vehicles and everyone else who needs it if we are prudent and conserve where we can. In closing, I want to remind people that these restrictions are temporary. In the case of the fuel situation, it's over the next 10 days. 10 days of us doing the right thing. In terms of the roads, it's about ensuring that our emergency vehicles and supply chain vehicles and commercial vehicles can continue to get through to where they're needed. So I'll now turn this update over to Minister Fleming. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Farnworth, and good morning. I want to start this morning's update with a progress report on the first corridor that's been reestablished that we announced yesterday afternoon, connecting Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley with the rest of British Columbia. This is Highway 7 to Hope, which was damaged and repaired, and then Highway 3 from Hope to the southern interior, which opened days earlier than expected yesterday afternoon at approximately 2 p.m. Of course, the segment of this route that begins in Agassiz and ends in Princeton is subject to travel orders, restricted vehicles only. It is designed to allow for the movement of essential goods and services, or for people who need to travel because they've been stranded for some days and are seeking to get home to their primary residence. The full corridor was opened yesterday afternoon, and I'm pleased to say it has performed well, and this has been extremely helpful for goods movement in British Columbia, connecting the Lower Mainland with the rest of the province. We've had roughly a couple of hundred commercial vehicles that have now gone through. I'm advised by the BC Trucking Association that from 192nd and 24th Avenue in the Lower Mainland to Carameus is currently taking trucks about 10 hours on a fully functioning highway system that would normally take between 5 to 6 hours, so it is slow as we expected yesterday. There are single-lane alternating traffic areas that are making that a slower route, and people need to drive to conditions. The work is not done on the highway, but it is functioning. There's a lot more to do to get the highway back up to full condition. And I can't stress enough that keeping this corridor open right now is vital to British Columbia. It's vital to help where certain goods are running short, to get them on the move through trucks to communities that are experiencing pinch points in our supply chain. It's vital to allow people who have been under the care and shelter of others to get home to see their family and loved ones. So obey the travel restrictions, but also when you are permitted to use a corridor like the number 3, the last thing we want is to have to clear an accident because of careless driving. So I do want to thank people, though, because the reports are that people are driving patiently. They're driving in mixed traffic of passenger vehicles and trucks, and they're being mindful of one another, and that is crucially important. Next update is on Highway 99. This is subject to travel orders as well that are quite different than Highway 3. As Minister Farnworth acknowledged at the outset of this update, it is very sad, tragic news for the province that Search and Rescue and the RCMP have confirmed the deaths of other individuals from the slide event, and our thoughts are with their families and their loved ones at this time. And RCMP and Search and Rescue have been working with the Ministry of Highways congruently and with each other's support collaboratively, both to unblock the road and also to search for people who are missing. And that work is going to continue, and we are able, while that work is continuing, to open the highway now at the same time. That will happen today very shortly at noon, and this will provide a second connection from the Lower Mainland to the interior and the north. This is the route beginning from Pemberton, going through Lillooet. In this case, it's designated for smaller vehicles. Because of the terrain, nothing larger than a cube truck will be allowed on the highway at this time. That is part of the orders. The highway will be open to 2 lanes. We will have maintenance contractors on patrol on this route. We expect to see some high traffic volumes as those communities that were cut off from one another are reconnected, and I would urge everyone that will begin to use Highway 99 this afternoon to plan accordingly and to drive safely. Highway 1, very briefly, the stretch of highway east of Chilliwack to Bridal Falls. the area moving out towards Hope. It has been closed, but crews have made good progress on that stretch of the Highway 1, and we're hopeful that we can have that reopened to limited travel by this evening, and we'll provide further updates to the media, including what, if any, travel restrictions there are going to be on that part of Highway 1. It's currently not under a travel order, but when it does reopen, we're going to ask people to be very careful. There will be crews continuing to work on that stretch of Highway 1. It's too early to say on the other stretch of Highway 1 that still remains underwater in the Abbotsford-Sumas area when it can reopen, until those waters recede more and we can get engineers on site to inspect the condition of that road. But we will continue to work with Minister Popham and farmers and the Abbotsford and Chilliwack governments on ways to get feed and water to animals in the Sumas prairies. Heading over to Vancouver Island, some good news for people getting in and out of the Capital Region along Highway 1. Last evening, the highway opened to two-way traffic, so no longer single-lane alternating. We have 2 lanes flowing in each direction. It is still an active construction site, I would stress. Repairs are continuing and will be for a number of months, so drivers need to be prepared for ongoing delays there. But a huge thank you to people who have been working for many days and nights to get the Malahat number 1 back in the condition that it is, and to be able to announce that there are 2 lanes in each direction. Highway 19 north of Nanaimo has been closed since Thursday afternoon because of a sinkhole. We're hoping to get that reopened tonight. In the meantime, would urge everybody to avoid that section of Highway 19. If you can, there is a detour in place, but the delays on this detour can be quite long. And similar to the Malahat, permanent repairs will take likely upwards of months. Further closures will be needed to get significant work periods to remediate and fix that. We'll communicate with the public in advance of any work that's going to be done and when that will be available for use. There's a lot of updates on various road closures and reopenings. I would direct everybody listening to this briefing to consult drivebc.ca. We now have an emergency travel information click button there that organizes the information that you might be seeking. Further on the weather that Minister Farnworth addressed the heavy rains forecast for the north, the Ministry of Transportation has extra crew and equipment on standby to respond as necessary. We put notifications out last night on Drive BC, and those will continue to be updated as the forecast becomes clearer. Just want to speak a little bit about our partnership with federal government and federal jurisdiction on corridors. Reopening vital highway corridors has been our primary responsibility. We have now established a supply chain recovery working group. The working group was formally announced earlier this morning, but we've already begun to meet, and we've begun our work. It involves the provincial and federal governments. We're working with private sector companies and industry stakeholders right across the supply chain, and this is really about developing options that can be actioned immediately to get essential goods to market, given the challenges and constraints that we face. Highway routes are beginning to open, as you've heard. Both CP and CN Rail are continuing to make assurances that their rail operations will be up and running at some point next week. They're reporting good progress. We will be advising on the need to balance community needs with the national economic interest as we address bottlenecks that are accumulating in the port and other parts of our supply chain. We will look at ways to divert traffic and establish new logistics chains, and to this end, I want to again extend my gratitude to my federal counterpart, Minister Alghabra, for his continued support that we are getting from Ottawa to get our supply chains up and running. And finally, just in closing, to staff in the ministry, to our road maintenance contractors, to everybody who's been in the fight to reopen highways, I can't thank people enough. People have been up day and night working around the clock. The updates today would not be possible without people working at an accelerated, exhausting pace, working together with local government, with fire departments, with really everybody, the military, to be able to plan the attack on getting highways reopened, and to that end, we owe a debt of gratitude to ministry personnel who have been doing this on behalf of all British Columbians. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to say thank you to all British Columbians who are hanging together right now and showing that extra patience that's needed. It means everything. Water and emergency feed continue to be a high priority for the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fish. This morning, we were able to airdrop 4 tons of feed to a hog farm in Abbotsford to feed about 4,000 to 5,000 hogs. This is a coordinated effort between with Clearbrook Milling, who is allowing for a staging area to gather that feed, and then BC Wildfire Service is moving it by helicopter to the impacted farms. Our ministry is working very closely with suppliers at the port and the feed mills in Abbotsford, and the result is that we've secured ingredients that are now being shipped to 3 main Abbotsford feed mills so that livestock will be getting feed. We believe we've secured feed for about 5 to 6 days. We'll be looking probably outside the port at that time, but we have had extremely generous offers from the federal government, Alberta and Saskatchewan, who have reached out to support, and even our neighbors in Washington State have offered supplies for us. Our ministry staff has been having daily video meetings with industries that are most effective, which includes dairy, poultry, hogs, cattle, and of course feed mills and suppliers. We're continuing to work very hard on the permitting process to allow farmers to get back into their farms as needed. The province is facilitating the military support that was made available yesterday, and this is going to help farmers access their farms in a safer and quicker manner as the conditions allow. Farmers in the agricultural sector are considered essential as far as moving about on our highway system, and we have had good success, I think, seeing food being moved through the Fraser Valley into the Lower Mainland. In fact, we have farmers from Coston that left late last night traveling down Highway 3. They had no problems, and they have a large vehicle filled with food that supplies some of our Vancouver farmers markets, which are very important food hubs during time of emergency. So they've had success there, and I believe we've even had a farmer from the Fraser Valley attending their farmers market, which is pretty incredible. It's just such resilience in our agriculture sector. We are assembling a team to plan cleanup, and we're working with industry associations on that. We're working closely with West Coast Reduction, which is located at the Port of Vancouver, and other companies. CFIA is also supporting this discussion, and we are having conversations with municipalities about accessing landfills for disposal. And finally, on the issue of veterinarians, we have a list that's growing daily. We have about 70 vets that can be made available who are from British Columbia. We are not aware of any medication shortages, but my deputy, Tom Ethier, did send a note out across the country just putting a mark down that if we need anything, asking if people would be able to contribute, and there has been great success with that reach out. All of our neighbors are willing to help us in that regard. Even the chief vet from Washington has offered assistance if we need it, and we appreciate that very much. As far as moving veterinarians in and out of the valley, we've had a generous offer from Randy Wright from Harbour Air to allow us to fly folks into Harrison Lake and then distribute them as needed. So my request, I think, at this time is for British Columbians to continue to tread lightly around each other and show that patience that's needed. The best thing you can do right now is follow the orders so that we have the resources that will allow us to continue to respond to this very difficult situation. I'd also like to say to the farmers right now that have had no sleep and are going through an incredibly emotional, difficult time, thank you for all of your efforts. I know you're helping each other, you're working with your communities, and you're trying to get back online, and all of our hearts are with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A reminder to reporters on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You will be limited to 1 question and 1 follow-up. We'll start in the room with Keith Baldry, Global News.
Question for Minister Farnworth. Any thought given to asking Ottawa to move up that November 30 sort of, when the rule kicks in, no PCR test required to go across the border? Surely that would ease the pressure on the gas market, Metro Vancouver, allowing people to go to Bellingham and Blaine to fill up.
No, that's a very good question, and thanks for that. I have been on the phone with Minister Blair, and the Premier's office is also being in touch with the federal government. We would like to see them lift that use of the PCR. It's going to be done anyway on the 30th of November, so why not do it now? I put the request into Minister Blair, and he's busy working on that.
Follow-up, Keith?
Yes, for Mr. Farnworth and probably Minister Fleming as well. Is there an update on the request for gasoline from the United States? The Premier talked about reaching out as far as California, also Alberta. Any sense when gas could actually arrive? And also, Minister Fleming, is any chance of will you ask CP to prioritize its shipments once that rail line opens for such things as gasoline and food over other goods?
Both of those, onto both of those questions, in terms of gas coming up from from Washington State, Oregon, and California, we have been actively in discussions with gas companies down there. It would be barged up. It would take about 3 days from the farthest to be able to get them up here, but that work is in progress. I can tell you that in terms of CP Rail, the railways, when they reopen, that the transport of fuel is a top priority.
Next question, David Ball, CBC.
Minister, just about the travel restrictions and the highways opening, the 99 and the 3, which vehicles are those open to? You said the cube truck maximum size, the 99. Is that just essential, Phil?
Thank you. Yes, on the 99, it's passenger vehicles, no larger than a cube truck. So if somebody owns a cube truck as their vehicle or is moving things that they evacuated, they can, but that's the largest size of the vehicle. It's just because of the road condition there, and we do not want heavy commercial vehicles on that route, and so that will open this afternoon shortly, and people are going to have to be patient, drive very safely and slowly, and observe the driving conditions that are there, we will, on the number 3, the restrictions are somewhat the opposite. It is prioritized for commercial vehicles. Of course, passenger vehicles can be on that route, but essential travel on the number 3 is for people returning home who have been stranded in other communities. So the primary residence is in the South Interior and they're trying to get home.
Do you have a follow-up, David?
Yes, just to clarify, so the 99 has no essential restrictions for travel. Anyone can travel there. That's a small vehicle.
We want people to travel for essential purposes, which is reconnecting with their primary address. We don't want people, using as a commuter route just now. These restrictions are in place north of Pemberton through the Lillooet Slide area because that is a road that remains damaged, that has highway crews working on it, and of course, as I mentioned, still an active search and rescue and RCMP presence.
Next question, Monica Gould, City News.
Hi, first question regarding these gas limitations. As soon as it was announced, we saw gas stations busy, long lines, people filling up jerry cans. Was it maybe a mistake to announce this? Was it a mistake to maybe put these restrictions? Because it seems to have caused a panic and people hoarding, which was sort of what the province had been trying to avoid.
We have seen gas lines forming for a number of days now. The reality is we made the decision based on the information we have about the supply of gas coming into the province. And it's critical that we make sure that it is available for the emergency services and for the ability to move and transport goods around. And this is a critical period of about 10 to 11 days, 10 days as of today. And that's why the limit of 30 liters has been put in place. Yesterday when I made the announcement, I said I expect there will be people who will not want to respect that. But I also know this, the overwhelming majority of British Columbians will do the right thing and respect that 30-liter limit. We have seen time and time again through the challenges that we face that most people in this province will do the right thing. I can also tell you that gas stations, and we've been in discussion with the gas companies, are moving as quickly as they can to where the gas meter will automatically click off. at 30 liters. The bottom line is this. People understand that we are in a very challenging situation, that our supply routes have been significantly damaged, that there are people thousands of people who've been displaced, huge impacts in our agricultural sector, that we have to maintain our supply routes. We have to be able to get goods to where they're needed. And we have to have our emergency services functioning. And that means for this 10 days, we all have to do our part. And that means that the 30-liter limit per fill-up, or every time you fill, is there. It doesn't mean that, 3 days later you can't go back. It just means that right now, 30 liters is the maximum that you can take. Is it a challenge? Yes. Is it inconvenience? Of course it is. But it's also going to get us through this critical period.
Monica, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Yes, I also wanted to talk about the list of essential vehicles, or which vehicles are deemed essential, and that those ones that are able to get more than 30 liters. We're hearing from some security services companies, security guards, who say they have been left off. Is this intentional? Was it maybe an oversight? Would the province maybe explore adding them in? They say they should be deemed essential given the work that they do. Any comment on that?
The way that it is structured is that the fuel depots that are serviced, for example, let's say the City of Vancouver or a fire department, they get all the fuel that they need to get through that current system. If they're using a card lock system, they are able to access all the fuel that they currently need. The rest of us, it is 30 liters at a fill. That does not mean that you can't go back and get additional fuel what it means is we need to be careful in our travel. And so obviously someone engaged in that, will require and will go back. But people need to recognize that a 30-liter limit, it's the next 10 days, that's what's going to get us through this.
Next question, Nick Johansson, Castanet. Nick, you there? All right, moving on, we'll go to Sarah Anderson, Daily Hive.
Can you hear me there?
Oh, sorry, yep, we'll keep with Nick. Thank you, Nick. Please go ahead.
Hi, this question is for Minister Farnworth. As I'm sure you're aware, Minister, two journalists, Amber Bracken and Michael Toledano, were arrested while doing their jobs covering the Wet'suwet'en conflict yesterday. They were doing a job that all levels of Canadian courts have repeatedly highlighted the importance of. My question to you as the Minister who oversees the RCMP in this province is, will the RCMP, who have once again appeared to infringe on Canada's constitutionally protected free press, face any repercussions?
All I will comment on at this point is that the RCMP were enforcing a court injunction. As you know, I do not direct the RCMP. I do know that two journalists were detained and were subsequently released.
Do you have a follow-up, Nick?
Yes, Minister, can you explain to British Columbians why during this natural disaster, the RCMP, along with helicopters, have been sent to this isolated logging road in the north of the province?
There is a court injunction that is in place that the court has ordered enforced. Operational decisions on that are made by the RCMP, and they are not made by myself as Solicitor General.
Next question, Cole Schisler, Black Press.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. As a brief anecdote to Keith's earlier question, I traveled through the U.S. from the Lower Mainland to the interior yesterday, and a PCR test was not asked for when I crossed back into Canada. So my question is, with Highway 99 reopening and Highway 7 to Highway 3 now open, is there any need for people to travel through the U.S.? I guess, is it advisable for British Columbians to travel through Washington for, essential reasons?
I'll let Minister Fleming deal with that question, but before that, I will just say this. That's why we've asked Minister Blair on the PCR test issue, the border, so we can make it to make it clear that that exemption for here in British Columbia needs to be in place, and we feel it needs to be in place as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I would just add that the expeditious clearing of trucks is of particular importance to our supply chains right now. Having another route through northern Washington back into the interior of the province from the lower mainland will be a supply chain that we may need for some months. We'll have updates on the Coquihalla number 5 and what a plan may look like if we can restore service and when, but I would suggest that and thank U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, Canadian Border Security Agency, and others who have helped make it easier for truckers to do what are called transit routes through Washington State now back into British Columbia.
Cole, do you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you very much. For the next question, we go to Ethan Cox, Ricochet Media.
Thank you very much. This is a question for Mr. Farnworth. Just to follow up on the question about the 2 journalists who were arrested, I wanted to understand, first of all, you said just now that they were released. Can you confirm they've been released? Because their outlets are not aware of that.
What I can tell you is the information that I am aware of, and that is that the RCMP, in the course of enforcing that court-ordered injunction, that there were 2 journalists who were detained and that they have subsequently been released. That is the information that I have.
Ethan, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask Mr. Farnworth, at what point does your duty of oversight come into play? Because we've seen the RCMP have been acting at odds with the courts. We've seen multiple court rulings this year which found that the RCMP's conduct, particularly towards journalists, was unlawful. So you always respond to these questions by saying, "Oh, look, it's at arm's length. I'm not going to direct policing operations." But you are the democratic authority that has control over the RCMP. You're supposed to have oversight. So, why are you not able to do anything to make sure that the RCMP is complying with the court's direction and not doing things which are clearly illegal, like arresting journalists?
I oversee the Police Act and public safety in the province of British Columbia. I do not direct the police, and you do not want politicians directing the police. For complaint processes, for people who feel that there are that their rights have been infringed, there are complaint processes in place, legislated complaint processes that can be accessed by people, and I can tell you that they are, and that those complaints are investigated, and there are bodies that do that.
Next question, Robert Tuttle, Bloomberg News.
Yeah, hi. I'm wondering if there's any thought to suspending the LCFS program regarding fuels during this crisis, or has that already been done?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the acronym that you're mentioning. We have technical. Yeah, could you repeat the question?
Low carbon fuel standard program?
Oh, the low. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So yes, there is discussion about whether there's an ethanol shortage around the LCFS standards and how the province might respond. Right now, the job is on reestablishing supply. So the updates we gave you today from CP Rail, where they're pre-positioning fuel tankers that could get back on rail restored, the sourcing of supply from Washington State, Oregon, and California. That's our #1 goal, compatibility of U.S. fuel and Canadian fuel standards. Obviously, in a crisis, you make prudent decisions that are going to help people. This is going to be a short-term supply challenge, and we'll work with the federal government and other regulatory agencies to have common sense approaches to whatever we need to do to alleviate supply pinches.
Robert, do you have a follow-up?
So, yes, you are looking to suspend that program temporarily?
I can't give you an up-to-date note about what that decision looks like, other than to say it's been circled as an issue, that we might run out of some of those additives like ethanol, just as we resupply fuel that is is of a different standard or has different low carbon additives. So we'll advise if that materializes as an issue, how we're going to handle it.
Next question, Peter Mitham, Country Life.
Mr. Popham, and possibly also Minister Fleming, but Minister Popham, remarked on farmers markets in Vancouver being supplied, but my understanding or my observation here is that a lot of the grocery stores have not been stripped as bare as those, say, east of Langley and in the interior. And so I'm just curious to know if those 200 commercial trucks that headed to the interior since yesterday were delivering grocery or food materials and the like to restock and ensure that British Columbians in the interior have adequate access to food.
Hi, Peter. Thank you for the question. So as far as I know, that there were food deliveries with those trucks going through, and that's good news. We do need to see that food moving both ways in the province to restock those shelves. But we also know there's food coming in from the Alberta side, which is also restocking. I think initially there was some hoarding happening, and in some cases that's continuing, but we also see that British Columbians are starting to understand that they need to do their part, and we see some incredible acts of generosity, of sharing. I did hear a story yesterday about a community, a block that got together and kind of inventoried their resources, and they're sharing in that way. So I think everyone understands it's all hands on deck, and those shelves will be restocked. We do not have a food shortage, and so I think we'll see that start to level out over the next little while.
Peter, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thanks. We've seen over the past year that the food system is fairly resilient. However, BC Milk Marketing Board had indicated that there was a critical shortage of BC's milk supply directly related to the catastrophic floods. And so I know we're all scrambling for information, but I just was curious to know if you have any sense, Minister Popham, of the hit that milk production, chicken production, egg production has taken, if there's any clear sense of the percentage by which those particular commodities are down as a result of the flooding.
Well, we're still doing that analysis right now, but we also learned yesterday that thankfully the milk pickups have been continuing through the Fraser Valley now. So we're going to see things start to come back online. And as I've mentioned before, we are part of supply management, so other parts of Canada will also start to pick up the slack as far as being able to supply British Columbia. But of course, there will be some of that, the supply that we were seeing coming from the Fraser Valley for eggs and poultry and dairy. There's no doubt that it'll be affected, but as far as our food supply, we're going to be okay.
Next question, Gordon Hoekstra, Vancouver Sun.
Oh, hello there. Thank you for taking my question. I'm just wondering if there's any sense with this additional forecast rain in southwestern BC, what that might mean for flood levels in the Fraser Valley or any kind of other risk areas.
So in terms of the as rain moves south, what I've been advised by Environment Canada is they're looking at about 20 to 40 millimeters of rain. Normally that would not be an issue in terms of concern, but obviously given the current the saturation that we have seen in the ground, we're following that very closely. Obviously, with the number of people on the ground, on the dikes, working to ensure that everything that we can do to make sure that we're able to deal with water, whether it's rising or wherever it's going, and the cleanup and that, we're watching very closely to make sure that everybody's aware, alerted, and prepared. And of course, work in constant contact with Environment Canada on the situation as it changes very quickly.
Gordon, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Yeah, the minister partially answered it already. I just was wondering if there's sort of any additional kind of preparations or resources or communication that's being considered as this rain is expected to arrive. I believe Sunday.
Right, I'd say right now the key is communication, watching what happens with this with the weather as it comes down over the next few days. As I said, there are significant resources on the ground as we know already, and obviously we will be watching, and if there are issues and challenges, then resources will be deployed to those areas. But the critical piece right now is to have good communication with Environment Canada, so that we're able to on an hourly basis understand what, the weather and what to expect, and if it changes, and what will that mean.
Thank you very much. That concludes today's update. Our next scheduled update is set for Monday, November the 22nd.